Hello and welcome to News in Depth on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. A missing metre of track on the Warsaw-Lublin train line, coupled with a C4 explosion, marks the first such attack since the 1940s, an event that Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called, quote, an unprecedented act of sabotage on Poland's railways, with suspects linked to Russian intelligence fleeing to Belarus. The incidents raise grave security concerns. Joining us is Stuart Dowell, political editor, to unpack the 1 metre warning and its wider implications. Stuart, welcome back. Great to have you.
Hi.
Hi. Now, I want to go through all of this in just a second, but let's kick off with a short soundbite and I'll get your view on it.
Mm-hmm.
And now, perhaps the most important piece of news today. Thanks to the concerted efforts of our security officials, the police, and the prosecutor's office, we've identified the individuals responsible for the recent sabotage incidents. I'm talking about 2 incidents that have been identified so far: the sabotage in the village of Mika and near Puławy. At this point, we know for a fact that both incidents, the attempt to blow up the tracks and the damage to railway infrastructure near Puławy, were deliberate. There were perpetrators behind these attacks, and their goal was to cause a railway disaster.
OK, so those are the facts. What is your reading of those facts as they currently stand?
Well, what we saw over the weekend is the most serious, high-scale, even military attack, we can call it, in Poland for decades. Donald Tusk said it was the most serious event since Russia's full-scale invasion. But if you look back, it's really the largest attack of its kind since the 1940s. Rail networks were sabotaged by Germans in Poland in 1938, before the Second World War. Of course, the Polish underground carried out attacks on the German-operated Polish rails during the war. Even after the war, Polish partisans, anti-communist partisans, attacked the railway. So that's why I described it as being the biggest, most significant since the 1940s. It's like that. So
it's an attack on transport infrastructure, designed clearly, to disrupt supplies. Do supplies going to Ukraine go along this track?
Yeah, they do. The attack happened on there were 2 attacks in 2 places, both on the section from Warsaw to Lublin, but those trains can go further down to Rzeszów, which we know is an important hub for logistics. There's a branch line that goes to a different crossing into Ukraine. So there's a lot of equipment that can go down there, and also a lot of people, a lot of Ukrainians, sometimes high-profile visitors coming through Poland to go to Ukraine, can go on there. But you mentioned it was an attack on logistics. I think. When I came into work this morning to cover this story, I was convinced that it was another one of these Russian hybrid grey zone, under the threshold signalling attacks, where Russia was signalling what it can do. Look, we can do this to your rail network. Just imagine what we can do if we want to scale it up. But even today, more information has come through that suggests this was really an attempt to bring to derail those trains and cause a mass casualty event, which would be an escalation way beyond the drone incursions that we had in Poland and seen in other countries, way beyond that.
Well, I mean, I want to come to the implications of that. But as I understand it, what you're saying is that we're talking about taking the next step, the next provocation, by probably Russia, allegedly Russia, but I can't think who else it might be, which is designed not only to disrupt supplies to Ukraine, but also to cause some kind of human disaster as well. What else do we know about how it was done or who did it?
Well, quite a lot now. We know that the perpetrators used C4 explosive. Donald Tusk said in the clip They used around 20 to 30 centimetres of this explosive, and they put it on one of the tracks. They knew what they were doing, so analysts have been describing these as professionals. They put it on the part of the track where the two pieces of rail join. It's the weakest point. The place generally on the wider track was before a turning, so it's also a weak point for trains can more easily come off the rails. One analyst noticed that there was no crater from the explosion, so the perpetrators really knew exactly how much plastic explosive to use. It blew away a kind of a clean 1 metre section. There was a 300-metre wire leading from the area back into the forest line, and the perpetrators used a mobile telephone as a detonator. There was even a camera set up on a tree to record the incident. There are different interpretations of why that might have taken place. It might have been set up by the perpetrators to have that kind of propaganda footage that Russia would certainly love to use, or it might have even been set up by handlers.
Yeah, now that's fascinating, because up until now, many of the people who have been arrested, both in Poland and in other countries, who are carrying out these acts of sabotage, tend to be those who are not professionals, who tend to do it, just for the money, for example. But these guys you're saying are professionals. They're, perhaps special forces of some description, who were specifically guided towards this kind of attack.
Well, all we know at the moment is what Donald Tusk said in the Polish lower house this afternoon, that there are two suspects. They've both crossed the border into Belarus. One is known to be a man who has already been sentenced in absentia in Lviv for sabotage attacks in Ukraine, and is known to have worked with Russian intelligence services, and the second is a man from the Donbass area.
Right.
Both Russian speakers.
Okay, so talking about those suspects, we've got another short soundbite that I'd like to share, and then a couple more questions on that.
The individuals we are referring to, the ones under suspicion, include a Ukrainian citizen convicted by a court in Lviv in May of this year of acts of sabotage in Ukraine, who's been residing in Belarus. The second suspect is a resident of Donbass. He crossed from Belarus into Poland together with the first suspect in autumn of this year, shortly before the attacks. After carrying out an act of sabotage in the village of Mika, both individuals left Poland through the Terespol border crossing. This occurred shortly after the attack, before they had been identified by the authorities. Polish security services and the prosecutor's office now have full data on these individuals, including images of the perpetrators' faces.
Now, what I find difficult to understand, Stuart, and perhaps you can help me out, here's a guy who's been convicted of sabotage in Ukraine, in absentia. He's in Poland, but no one ever identified him. No one ever considered him a threat. I mean, how did that happen?
Well, I don't think that's known to the public yet. Exactly how it's likely that he was convicted, sentenced in absentia while he was in Belarus. How he got across from Belarus, it's hard to say. Maybe together with illegal migrants.
Right. So that perhaps might indicate tighter controls at the border with Belarus.
Yeah.
I mean, Poland's just reopened two border crossings to Belarus. There are now 3, I understand, in total between the two countries. Do you think that that Poland should be looking at seriously vetting those that come into Poland more carefully?
Of course, yeah, and I'm sure that Polish services are already doing that. But with the numbers of people that have come across since the war started, I know that in this particular case, these people have got some record behind them, and perhaps there'll be questions about why they specifically were not picked up by Polish services. But in general, 1.4 million people have crossed from Ukraine into Poland, and for sure, Russia has had some of its own people passing themselves off as refugees and maybe being sleeper agents to be reactivated later.
Right. Now, the fact that they were given free entry into Belarus suggests a certain amount of strategic planning, doesn't it?
Yes, for sure. This operation would have been planned for a long time. The security analysts are suggesting that it was very professionally planned, and the people who carried it out, the people who planned it, the handlers, certainly knew what they were doing, but the people who carried it out as well. Let's just remind viewers that in the second incident, a metal chain was thrown above the overhead power lines, which caused them to collapse onto the train, smashing out windows, terrorising people on the train, and knocking out the train's some of the train's system. And that was before, a couple of 100 metres later, it rolled onto a kind of metal clamp that had been welded across the lines. They're clearly designed to derail the train. The analysts are saying that it was only because the train slowed down that the derailment didn't happen.
Right, so clearly I'm sure that Polish security services will be looking at border crossings and tightening up the criteria for letting people through. But what about the railways as a whole? I mean, I believe there's something like 19,000 kilometres of railways in Poland. In fact, we've got a soundbite on that. I'd like to have a quick look at.
We got something like 19,000 kilometers of railways in Poland. It is a huge number, and it is, of course, impossible to protect each kilometers of those railways. But we got protects. We can protect those main points and main elements of railways. We got some experiences coming from Ukraine, and Ukraine is running war. This is something what we can easily do, and we will do it.
See, what strikes me is that in many senses this shouldn't have been a surprise. Poland has been facing hybrid attacks from Russia ever since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022 for the second time. There have been warehouse fires, various crypto hacking attacks, and so on. So, you just heard there the former deputy head of Polish Foreign Intelligence saying, well, we've learned a lot from Ukraine. Surely all of this knowledge should have been in effect by now, protecting the railways and other infrastructure. Why isn't it?
Well, as the speaker said, as you said, that Poland has 19,000 kilometres of railway, and it's possible to protect them all. And there are other vulnerable areas of Polish infrastructure as well, like water treatment plants, everything connected with the water system, as well as power station, heating plants, and it is impossible. I think that the main way to defend against this is through vigilance of society. So that requires public information, education. I mean, Poles are getting better at that because of the atmosphere surrounding what's happening, and the sense that the war is getting closer will increase people's vigilance. And I think that's the way to deal with it. I think in any war, when there are people operating behind the lines, a country will always be vulnerable.
Indeed, and I think that's a very powerful message there. Let's all keep our eyes open. I think we will have something to contribute to that effort. Now, zooming out a little bit, if we look at various hybrid attacks, which were orchestrated by Russia. So, for example, drones into Polish airspace, the fires I've already mentioned. This. And also in other countries, in the Baltics and so on. When will NATO say Russia is at war with us? And what will it take before we say, yep, that is the defining feature, that is what tells us?
Well, it's a good question, and there's discussion going on at the moment. Does this qualify as an Article 5 triggering event? My view is not yet, because the perpetrators haven't been caught. We haven't got an exact chain of evidence. I mean, it's kind of obvious. People are saying that they know that it's Russia, and I agree with them. But for other countries in the alliance, there are 32 countries. They'll want a bit more evidence. Countries down in the southwest of Europe, Portugal, they'll definitely want to hear a bit more rather than just charging into Article 5. But also, Russia will be very well aware what the threshold is, and these attacks are described as below the threshold attacks for a reason. And Russia will be aware of that and will get as close to the threshold as possible to reap the benefits for itself. And the benefits are many. Of course, they can use these incidents to test the reactions of Polish services. But more than that, it creates, if there were such an incident of a train derailing, there would be much more greater sentiment in Poland. Why are we even close to this war? This is not our war. This is their war. We shouldn't even be helping them. We shouldn't be sending any money, any equipment. These voices already exist in Poland, but there would certainly be many, many more if such an incident had happened. And Russia would know that there are political forces in Poland where the politicians, where those people would seek, would go to, especially on the far right.
Yes, but there are also many voices which say that Ukraine isn't the final objective, Putin's final objective. We think about the Baltics, but I think that Poland could also be at threat, and other countries surrounding Ukraine could also be at threat from Russia if Ukraine were to fall. So yes, I mean, it's simply a matter of luck that no one was killed by the drones that fell in Poland, or in the fires that were lit, or the train attack. If people had been killed, do you think people in Poland would be more willing to say, well, hang on, this is the threshold?
Yes, for sure. There would be much greater division in Polish society about whether to continue supporting Ukraine. We know that there's fatigue in society, and that's led to anti-Ukrainian sentiment. Russia will be aware of this. Could it have the
opposite effect and say, hang on, this is Russia waging war on us. We need to respond as NATO?
On the other side, yes, there are different forces, and an event like this would create different viewpoints. It would create chaos and informational chaos as well. Because also the other thing to remember is that when any of these events happen, but also we saw this at the weekend. Russian troll bots are automated, come into action to try to place the blame on Ukraine, and that's as well one of the objectives to try to create this narrative that Ukraine is carrying out these terrible attacks to draw Poland into a war that nobody wants. So that could happen as well.
So chaos, disinformation, pushing the boundaries with NATO, all part of Russia's hybrid strategy. Let's hope that we get some resolution, some robust resolution in the near future. Stuart, as always, thank you so much for your analysis.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.